So, I wanted to talk, I guess, a little bit about dogma today. Um, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. And when people sometimes come to the ashram or come to spirituality, especially like a more open and non-sectarian spirituality, they sometimes cop up the intention and that the practice is full of full of dogma. And I can't stress enough at how important it is to see beyond the dogma and to see that actually the practices that we do, the Tantra that we're practicing, and the things that we learn. And yes, there are also a lot of esoteric practices. There are practices that might even seem New Age, although they're not. They have a long tradition of practicing these in certain parts in India, doing these practices in India. And what I always say, it's like this thing that the Buddha said as well. Just, the Buddha says, just do the practice and see these things for yourself. Don't believe everything that I say. And I have to say the same thing, whatever we talk about here or at any point, see these things for yourselves in your own being and don't just believe them because maybe I've experienced them in my own being, or my teachers have experienced them, or the lineage, or the tradition itself says that we have experienced things in a certain way. Find these things out for yourself. So what we ask in Tantra, what we ask in yoga, is to be open to the possibility, but don't take it just at face value. It's really, really important that we don't. We're not trying to go back into religious dogma, go back into just trying to convince yourselves of beliefs. It's really important that we are open to finding these things out on our own. Ramakrishna has a saying, or had a saying, where he said, "What's the use of speculating what the fruit on a tree tastes like? Rather, go and try the fruit, and then you can discuss afterwards what that fruit tastes like." So, and don't believe what it might taste like. Taste it for yourself. So, I'll open up with that, and we can talk further about it, or if there's also other questions as well, we can move into that. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what my question is. It's more maybe like, what's your thought on that? But it seems when people, I think it's more like with the main religions, the case often when people start to feel like there's really strong resonance with, let's say, Christianity or Islam or something, that sometimes it seems almost like for a safety measure, they start to take on not only what brings them like joy in their heart, but also dogma, because I think there's this like inner need for people to feel a sense of belonging to a certain community, right? So that's my feeling why people often take on dogma, is because it's easier to take on the whole thing and feel like, take the good parts and also maybe the bad parts, to feel like you can relate to others.
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't have this like discernment yet, to know it so deeply for themselves that they don't need to take on the dogma.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe just what's your thought about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, often when a teacher speaks, it's usually for the people that they speak to, for that audience in that place in that time. So the teacher's words can be misconstrued by somebody coming from a different culture, by somebody coming from a different place in a different time. So then dogma is there because even though certain things might not be relevant anymore, we still carry it on. And we see this a lot, like with the sage Osho. We see this a lot, where you read one of his books and it drives you crazy because on one page he'll say one thing and 2 pages later he will say that that thing is false and this is a new thing. And so what he was trying to do was to break these dogmas, these things. And I feel like, yeah, that sense of belonging is really important for people. But as well, when we come at it with the mind and not with the heart, the mind needs to have structure and needs to know you have to do things at this time and you can't do things at this time, and you have to do, you have to do this, and you cannot do that ever. And like they're very, very strict things. And Jesus as well was rebelling against in his day, at least the stories we have of Jesus, he was rebelling in his day against the Jewish tradition at that time. And he said, somebody asked him, because he was caught doing something that he shouldn't have been doing on the Sabbath. And he said, if one of your sheep fall into a ditch and you're not supposed to, or fall down a ravine and you're not supposed to work on Sabbath, shouldn't you rescue this sheep? Shouldn't you help out this person who's in need? Or do you strictly adhere to the law? And so he was kind of speaking to the heart in this way. Like, of course, we help the person out, even though we're not supposed to, or whatever the situation was that he was doing. So dogmas are created for a certain time period, for a certain culture, and sometimes they might not be relevant anymore. And dogmas as well are created really based on belief. And like in Christianity, it's all about the beliefs. Like you have to be a Christian, you have to believe that Jesus Christ was our Lord and Savior. And you have to believe the certain things that are being fed to you. And if you don't believe those, then you're not a good Christian. You don't fall into actually being a Christian. Rather than actually looking at Scripture with clear eyes, with a clear way with discernment, really, as to how it can really affect your life now, and if these things are maybe even relevant to you today. So yeah, this sense of belonging in like a community is really important, and I feel like a lot of people become involved in organized religion for the community aspect as well. They join their nearby church so that they have support and they have help and they have this and that. And then in doing so, those good things and bad things have to be adhered to, those good dogmas and bad dogmas, or dogmas in general, they have to be adhered to, because then the community, there's also kind of a peer pressure as well. Like in some forms of Christianity, drinking is really taboo. If you're a good Christian, you can't drink alcohol. And so then you have to take that on if you want to be part of that denomination of that church, and take on the kind of local customs or even the dogmas of that. And there is a peer pressure from your community that they don't see you walking around drunk, let's say, or whatever it is. So yeah. I don't know if that answered your question. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would be your definition of dogma?
Dogma is when we follow a tradition solely on belief, and not on, and then because we just believe it, and we don't understand that, we don't uncover these truths for ourselves, then the dogma ends up ruling our lives, like Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. Well, let's actually feel this. If we're a Christian, we have to feel this. Just don't just say these things, but feel it, live it. If this is something that you need to go into, or of course, there's lots of different dogmas, but things like this, based solely on belief and not actually on experience. Now, in saying that, of course, coming to yoga, there's a lot of things maybe that we're asked to believe, but it's more, and this is why I always try to express this, let's consider it a possibility that these things are real, that these things might be. Or maybe you come up with your own, I don't know, system of the chakras, or your own stages or limbs of yoga, or whatever, stages of meditation, whatever it be. So we don't have to stick to these things, we don't have to stick to the things so strictly, but it's good for us to just be open to the possibility that this is how the limbs of yoga work, or the stages of yoga work. That first you need meditation, or first you have concentration, or you have asana, then you have pratyahara of going inward, then you have concentration, then you have meditation, and then you have samadhi. But maybe actually it works differently for you. So also be open to that, because these beliefs, if we believe, and I suffered from this as well, because we use our mind to follow a logical course of thinking, and we use our mind also in yoga in order to understand things logically. And for myself, understanding the 7 chakras, slowly throughout the years, I started to understand the 7 chakras more and more, but I was still very fixated on Sahasrara being at the crown of the head. So fixated on there, I forgot to realize that the crown chakra, that Sahasrara, is everywhere, is in every molecule, is in every cell of the being. Or another one would be that Kundalini is only in the center of the spine. Kundalini is in every cell. Kundalini is the grace of Shakti herself. And the rising of Kundalini isn't just like, I don't know, heat waves or a feeling of energy in the spine. It's in every cell, every part of our being, of the body, but also everything around becomes electrified, becomes absolutely transformative. So we shouldn't be so fixated on these points, because like fixating just on Sahasrara, I also missed out for a long time on understanding. And although I had heard that Shiva was infinite, I had heard that Shiva is timeless, I had heard that Shiva is consciousness, but I was just fixed here. And here isn't infinite. Here isn't necessarily consciousness is here, but not only here. And here isn't only timeless, but everything is timeless and everything has consciousness. So even, dogma, if we talk more about it, even science has its own dogmas. I was talking about this the other night in this Q&A that we had here, but that even science has its dogmas in believing that there's absolutely nothing beyond the material, not even being open to it. Just, it's like this closed-minded, it's being very closed-minded and not even being open to the possibility that something else might be there. My understanding is that the great scientists, they didn't see things in a dogmatic way, see things so closed-minded, which is why somebody like Albert Einstein could go beyond the normal discoveries of within the realm of science, and other scientists too. But because he knew that there is so much to the universe that was unexplainable. And so he wasn't trying to fit everything into a box, but rather trying to explain. And this is as well what we do to a certain extent in Tantra. We see how these things resonate within the body. We see what happens, let's say in yoga, we see what happens when we do a headstand. We see what happens when we do a forward fold. We see how certain sequences resonate in the body. We reflect on that. We see how this reacts within our being over the course of weeks and months. Not just the physical aspects, but the energetic aspects and the mental aspects. And we learn to live through this experiment of experience, through using Tantra, using yoga as a tool for consciousness, as a tool for awakening consciousness. So, thank you. Mm-hmm.
In regards to seeking out the experiences or the truth for like oneself, or like tasting the fruit of the tree, to use Ramakrishna's metaphor, how do we discern between like genuine desire and longing for the divine, having not yet experienced it, and only trusting the stories and experiences of like our teachers and others, as opposed to falling into dogma, like right at the start, don't we like only have belief before experience, and where does like trust fall into this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed, in the beginning of the path, there needs to be, and this is why in yoga, in Tantra, in a lot of different lineages, also in Sufism and things, it's not enough just to read scripture. You have to have a living master. You have to have somebody who has been there, done it, seen it, experienced it, to come back and to attempt to plant that seed. plant the seed of spirituality. So in the beginning, and this is why it's it's really important to have a teacher that you feel that you can trust. Because if you have a teacher, and this is why so many people who have gurus who have fallen from grace, or gurus who have been caught up in different sexual things or whatever, is why it's very hard for these people, because they suddenly feel like they can't trust these people, and everything that was transmitted must be false. If there was one lie, then maybe all of it's a lie. So it's really important that we trust the teacher, and that we also trust that what the teacher says has been acknowledged in their own being. So then it is, in the beginning, it is based on belief, but a true teacher and a true guru will always want you to experience that for yourself. Will want you to go into these things, to awaken it on your own, that the belief isn't enough. So really the teacher's job has been successful if the teacher can instill trust in the beginning, but true recognition in the end, true acknowledgement of what's happening in the end. I feel like there were more parts to that question that I haven't answered, or...
Yeah, it was more so like, how do you describe like the longing and just the trust and working towards something you haven't yet experienced, and like working towards being closer to the divine or whatever that may be, and like differentiate between that and just blindly following.
Yeah.
You know, like what?
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned longing, because longing isn't belief. When you long for the divine, this is coming from the heart. This is already awakened something that is not dogma. The longing is something that comes from within, and when we long for the divine, this is, this is all that we could hope for. That we long for the divine, and that longing doesn't end until we reach our goal. This is our prayer, really, that it goes this way. So as long as we have that, then we're safe, then we're not just basing our understanding on belief. But for some people, it's hard to awaken that, it's hard to awaken the longing. In the beginning, it might be that a person moves into or onto a spiritual path because their peers are doing it, or just for curiosity. And so for these people, it's necessary just to believe in the beginning, and then if that longing can be awakened, then they're kind of like the path becomes more and more set, because the longing is what helps us to awaken, essentially. And it is, it's an aspect of the heart, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my question still, I guess, stays with the theme of dogma. Mm-hmm. Would you say that all dogmas that are now are just misinterpretations of great masters that have offered teachings that just weren't able to be comprehended and then were transmitted in a way that created dogma? Or would you say that, what would you say the origin of dogma is, and why does it exist?
Yeah, Dogma exists really because teachings that were given are out of context now. They're like teachings that existed in the past that have come forward now are out of context. And usually, as you say, they are they're misinterpretations. They're actually interpretations of the Master's words always have to be through the heart. It can't be through the mind. So then when we try to read scripture through mind, we tend to, the mind thinks of things, of course logically, which is a good aspect of the mind, but it also tends to put things into boxes rather than also to leave the interpretation open as well for that to develop on its own, for the interpretation to become something new as well. Mm-hmm. And it's strongly adhered to because we start to, when we identify with the mind and with the contents of the mind, when we identify as body and as mind, then the dogmas, things that are just believed in, they are things that we identify with. So then we have to follow this. Because without identifying with that, who would we be? Where would we be? Like, for example, and I used this with this student yesterday, there's kind of a dogma with believing that the earth is round. We don't actually know that the earth is round unless we've gone into space and seen it for ourselves, unless we maybe are an astronomer and we can kind of gauge certain things, unless we're a pilot and we've flown around the equator ourselves, and we didn't sleep during that time. So it's something that we all accept, and which is probably true, but we take it at face value. The earth is round, everyone except maybe the flat earther. I'm not a flat earther, by the way, in any way, but I'm just saying, like, the flat earthers have an argument that's there. So, and there's so many things we take at face value like this is just the truth. But do we really know that this is the case? Do we really know that the earth is round? And we don't. And so there's a lot of things that were brought, there's a lot of things that our society, and we think like, okay, we leave the church, we're free from dogma, but then science has its own dogma, modern medicine has its own dogma, and all the rest. Our society has its own dogma, our cultures has its own dogma, things that like we don't do, things that are taboo, where we haven't really even thought of it. We haven't really even thought that maybe things could be in a different way. So that's why, coming back to the Buddha, he says, don't believe in anything anybody's ever said. Forget everything that you've learned and start fresh and gain your knowledge through your own experience, especially through your experience in meditation. But because even like the world the world that we live in, although is a very material thing, but it's also very mental. And the bigger illusion that we have is the mental illusion that tells us that certain things are as they seem, but they might not be as well. We've all had this experience that we feel that somebody was talking about us, we start to become depressed, we start to feel really bad, and then we find out that actually the person didn't say that at all. It was just our perspective on it. We were living in an illusion in that moment. And how many things are like this, actually? How many things are an illusion like this? So we need to take our own being as an entity, sure, but as an entity that is constantly rediscovering everything afresh and anew at every moment, and forget the memories we've had in these situations and come at life spontaneously. And by so doing, we can actually live in the present moment. We can really be present without the memories of the past and projections for the future. So that's kind of, in being able to see the world this way, we're able to start to integrate our spirituality into the world, because we can be more present, because we're not looking at the world in just the black and white way that we're used to. The same old, same old. Oh yeah, things are okay. I got the same job. I eat the same food every day. All of this thing. But let's really. Who knows how many lifetimes we'll have again, or if we ever get a human body again. So we have to really cherish what we have. What we have as a human body, and learn how to open to the reality which is calling us to.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a sense of comfort that comes with all these attachments that we have to who we are and what this is. So can you speak a little bit about the kind of discomfort that comes with letting go of the attachments and how to navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was, at some point in my life, I was contemplating this as well. And I asked my teacher, how can I let go of attachments? And he said, do more yoga. That we actually don't have to worry about it. The practice takes care of it. The practice takes care of it itself. So, attachments as well, I might clarify for people that attachments, becoming detached or without attachments, does not mean indifference by any means. It doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that at all. We care a lot, but we don't really have a better word for it in English, except maybe the phrase, and Alan Watts phrased this as, although it's a phrase that we have anyway, but he was saying it's like the phrase getting hung up, being hung up on something. So, if your car gets stolen, of course we're going to be upset that the car's stolen, we're stranded. It's not like, I don't care. I don't care about the car anyway. And being like, just denying that you cared about having a car that was expensive. Let's say you didn't have insurance on the car. It took you many years of work to make that car, to buy that car. It's of course very important to have a vehicle to get us from point A to point B. So the point though is to not, as Alan Watts is saying, to not get hung up on the fact that you don't have a car. Like not, getting really pissed off and running around like a crazy person, or and neither being like, I don't care, or being aloof, like I'm too good to care about a vehicle anyway, I'll just go on foot from now on. And in India, when you are at a temple and you lose your flip-flops, when you lose your shoes at a temple in India, it's supposed to be very auspicious because it means some attachments are going away. So what is recommended is that you continue the rest of your journey. And okay, going to a temple often didn't mean like just your local temple, but it meant like a pilgrimage. So then the whole pilgrimage would then be without shoes. And so you would be walking from point A to point B without shoes. So this is actually like a good thing that the shoes go missing. And shoes go missing a lot at the temples in India, which I don't need to go into why, but yeah, the attachments, to be detached, is a different quality or a different state of mind than indifference. It is a state of mind where we are able to keep our equilibrium throughout the highs and lows of our day, really. Highs and lows of life. That doesn't mean that we can't be happy and then sad and all of these things. This can still be happening with the body, with hormones, because hormones cause us to be happy or sad, of course. And if we don't still have these emotions, then maybe we should seek medical help, because it's important. Being a human means that we still have these emotions, but when we start to connect with the divine, with the sacred, which is within, when we start to connect with love, and when we are able to connect with the underlying inherent reality in all things, then we can't be shaken. We can have those highs and lows, but they don't affect us in the same way. We're able to laugh about how ridiculous it is that the mind is acting in such a way. So we're able to actually, and it's often described as a witnessing, that we're witnessing these things happening, and it's also totally okay if we're still getting caught up in these things, or the mind is getting caught up in these things, because eventually what happens is there's an integration, and then the highs and lows are less, but there's no lack of joy in that. And I'd like to stress that in this space of equalization, or this space of equanimity, which is maybe the more common word, that it's full of joy. Equanimity is content. It's not, we often think that when we, realize the self, realize spirituality, that we'll be in ultimate bliss, and it will be like, an orgasm times 1,000 or times 1,000,000 or something, like forever, or whatever. We have this that the angels will be at the gates of heaven, and they'll be blowing their trumpets, and things will be so amazing, and I don't know what, there will be a party and all of this, and this is why we miss and how we miss spirituality, because it's a serene contentment that's there in this place of knowing. There's it's a supreme contentment at being okay with those highs, being okay with the lows. And you can sometimes see this in certain sadhus in India. Not very often, I have to say, being there for so long. I don't want to insult anybody, but at least the places that I've been, the sadhus, maybe they were fresh sadhus, new sadhus, but I didn't see this very often. But one sadhu I met one time, actually, funny enough, in a Buddhist pilgrimage area, Buddhist pilgrimage place, this one sadhu, and he was the only Hindu sadhu in the whole area, probably the only Hindu in the whole area, and he was just quietly sitting on the ground, and he was obviously probably chanting a mantra. He wasn't sitting in a special pose or anything like this, and he just had this amazing, serene smile on his face, and he was doing mantra. And of course, he doesn't have a lot of money, probably. People were giving him food or giving him money. And I saw him a little bit later, and he had taken the money that he got from like the alms that were offered to him, the donation that was offered to him. He took this 10 rupees that he got, and he went and bought himself a chai. And then he was speaking with somebody at the chai stall. And then after that, he went back out and sat there in bliss for the time. So it's like this supreme contentment. And it's not this like, I don't know, angels blowing their horns and like this party that happens inside and this ultimate orgasm or whatever. It's just this feeling like no matter what happens, there is joy, there is bliss. And so the great bliss, the Mahananda, which is spoken about, is that of contentment. And it's the contentment of knowing that you can't die, that you can't be reborn, that you are infinite, that also the bliss in knowing, the contentment in knowing that all of this universe in which we live in, that it's all changing, it's always changing, but yet we know that we're infinite and we're eternal, and that aspect within can never change. It can never differ from what it already is and from what you already are. When you go beyond the changing, when you go beyond this aspect of you which is changing. And what is changing in you? The body changes a lot all the time. If you cut off a limb, you will still be you. The energy's changing. You wake up in the morning, you feel refreshed, or maybe you feel groggy, you still feel tired. The evening, you feel tired, or maybe you have a lot of energy in the evening. But so the energies are constantly changing in the body according to biorhythms and how much food you ate and what kind of foods you ate and all the rest. And emotions we know they constantly change. We identify with our emotions a lot. If I feel angry, I'm very justified to feel that anger. But then it goes away. I'm sad, okay, I have bouts of depression, I'm sad for 3 days a week, 3 weeks. Eventually, though, that also disappears. We don't need to, we can be rest assured that too will end. That even our day-to-day happiness, we eat a good piece of chocolate cake and we feel happy afterwards. You know, we have a rush of sugar. And so we feel happy afterwards. We feel like a bodily sort of contentment. But this too will fade because one day we will be hungry. And if we look at the mind, so a lot of us, we think that we're the mind, but the mind is ever changing. If you And people who have sat down to meditate will realize this, will realize the intensity of the mind as to how much the mind is changing. There's thoughts, there's so many thoughts coming into the mind and going out of the mind. For some of us, we can't even cope with how many thoughts there are. The thoughts are always changing. And like even our philosophical attitude in life, if you look at yourself from when you were 5, the attitude you had towards life is much different from what it was when you were a teen, to in your 20s, to in your 30s, for those of you who are in your 30s. So the philosophical outlook is also changing. So then what is it within you which is constant? We have to look towards that. And this is why meditation is so powerful, because meditation allows us to either slow down the mind or to have certain techniques or secrets, or they're not secrets, but little practices that help to stop the mind. And that stopping of the mind allows us to see, wow, there's something very great that's behind the thoughts. All these thoughts flow in the mind, and they keep us distracted, keep us in the outer world, keep us desiring and wanting more, and keeping us greedy, and keeping us vengeful, keeping us really attached to this outer world. But when we start to go inward, we can see that there's much more to our existence than the content of the mind, than the conditions of the mind, than the conditions of the body and the hormones. Even we just look at the hormones, how much the hormones play on our happiness. And Artemis, going through her pregnancy, realized, she was able to witness it all, but she was able to realize these crazy highs and lows coming from the hormones that were flowing through her system in order to be pregnant and eventually have a child, and these crazy hormones. And she was able to witness it all, and it was just crazy of how much happiness is how much for most people one's happiness is based on hormones and the hormonal content of our being. Mm-hmm. So looking beyond is very important. Looking beyond the changing. So in our meditation, we seek that which is beyond the changing in order to come to the changeless, that aspect of reality which is never shifting, and which is also the core of your being and everybody's being, and it's the same consciousness. Yeah.
So I read a long time ago, I told you this a few times, in I think Abhinavagupta says, from the heart of Bhairav arises Anuttara.
Mm-hmm.
So could you talk about what Anuttara means?
Anuttara. Actually, Anuttara is pronounced Anuttara. Anuttara. It's not Anuttara. Anuttara, we have anglicized it, so it's actually Anuttara. And Anuttara is it actually means indescribable. It means the ultimate. It means the infinite. And so the the god of that is worshipped by the Kashmir Shaivis, they worship the god Bhairava, or the god Bhairav, and so the deity Bhairav, and Bhairav is the most fearsome aspect of Shiva. As fierce as they come is Bhairava, and so Anuttara is this aspect of the infinite, the consciousness, yes, but the absolute, the highest of the high, the most beneficent, the most beautiful, the ultimate, which is equal to Bhairava. But sometimes it has been Abhinavagupta in his, because he's also very poetical in what he speaks, that out of the heart of Bhairava comes Anuttara, meaning that out of that the very heart of the ultimate aspect of everything comes everything else. Out of that comes that indescribable. So it's like this idea that Bhairava being that their godhead, that their main deity, that it resides a little bit more than that which is the indescribable. And so Anuttara is often described as the indescribable. So sometimes I will, when somebody asks what Anuttara means, I'll say, it's indescribable, it's unfathomable, it's ultimate in nature. But that's actually what Anuttara means, that it's unfathomable, that that with the mind, we can't go there with the mind. And as I was saying before, what is the mind? The mind is considered to be the thoughts, the condensing of thoughts. The mind is the kind of container for our thoughts. And so, as I was saying before, whenever we can stop the mind in some way, or see beyond the mind in another way, or be able to rest in the void between the thoughts in another way, we're able to enter in this place of void. We're able to actually enter into the space of Anuttara, because we can't describe it. It's indescribable. It is unfathomable. It is ultimate in nature. But as an experience for us, it's actually also beyond experience, because our experiences are based usually upon our sense impressions and upon phenomenon that's happening to us. So in this non-experienced, and everything also is experienced as well, that we do throughout our lives, except for this place of Anuttara, except for this aspect of Anuttara. So it's really, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate in nature, and nothing can be higher than it. But it is also everything at the same time. It is also the manifested universe. But it's kind of like how we try to picture the universe, with all of its galaxies, with all of the planets within the galaxies, with all of the stars that have planets rotating, or asteroids rotating about this. Like we can't, at some point, we can't do it with the mind. We have to see things in compartments or something. In the same way, but on a much grander scale, is Anuttara, is this aspect of the infinite that we can't fathom. Because it's the finite. The finite cannot fathom the infinite. And interestingly enough, Abhinavagupta wrote this 1200 years ago, and I decided on the name of the ashram around 17 years ago, and the being who gave me the name Bhairav or Bhairava, I only met 12 years ago. So it's not in correlation. And actually, when I asked Guruji what I should call what would be a good name for the ashram, he said, call it Bhairava Ashram. So it's actually the same word. It means the same thing, not in the tradition that Guruji comes from, but in the tradition of Kashmir Shaivism. So there's somehow some correlation there. Some synchronicity.
Can you speak a little bit more about your experience on your spiritual path, and did you have any shifts that kind of changed the direction from seeking to really living in the truth?
Mm-hmm. To knowing. Yeah, I feel like definitely when I started doing yoga, and I had my first yoga teacher, I felt there were a lot of shifts that came about, but they weren't really deep shifts of knowing being and all of this. But definitely some shifts came about which changed my perspective and which helped me to live in the world, a more happier person, to suffer less from, depression or whatever. I didn't really have depression, but to suffer less from loneliness and sadness and these sorts of things that many people suffer from in everyday life. So I had less of this. And I practiced yoga very intensively for a long time. And this tradition that I was coming from in yoga was a tradition without a master that was realized. So the practices that were being given was without the seed of enlightenment, really, was without the seed of realization. And at least this is my feeling, it's my perspective, it's what I've contemplated. And I did yoga for many years, very intensively, living in India for 4 years, living in Thailand for 4 years, and then coming here and doing retreats here over the winter months, very intensively, for a few years. And then eventually I was kind of starting to have my doubts that the path of yoga that I had been shown, not to say that it can't work for everyone, especially if you have a teacher that can plant that seed of enlightenment, that I was starting to get a little bit like, I'm going to give it the next 2 years, and then I'll go to India and find a guru. Now 2 years passed, a third year passed, and I felt the longing to go to India, that people who have spent time in India, we kind of get this longing to go back to Mother India. And so I was getting this longing, but I'd forgotten about this thing that I told myself, that I would go to India to find a guru. Because you can't say that you'll go somewhere and find a guru. It won't work out. You'll find the wrong teacher most probably, if you force this, if you force somebody being your guru, because it has to happen very organically. And so I went to India, and I met Guruji, and it was more curiosity. I was open to meeting every enlightened master or apparent enlightened master that I could. So it wasn't also like I was going to take the first person that I saw who might have some understanding as my guru. I just I was open to visiting all and every teacher that I could. And so I went to Guruji and met him, and it wasn't really long after, maybe a month, less than a month after meeting Guruji, that I had a major awakening and major opening into spirit, into the ultimate. And yeah, I feel like it was through his blessings and this seed of enlightenment. It's like I had prepared myself. Some people come to Tantra and there isn't a lot of preliminary practices before, so then it, of course, is going to take a little bit longer. But I feel like, on the one hand, doing so many years of yoga, I kind of, without an enlightened master there, that I somehow kind of wasted my time a little bit, because it could have been far more effective. It's like, I don't know, trying to make money and realizing that you're just in the wrong profession. Like, that's, being a dishwasher, it's a great job, but you're not going to make $1 million doing it. So it's like, kind of like realizing that. But as well, I also don't have any regrets or resentment or anything like this. That the path that I was on was very necessary for that awakening to happen, and for myself to also, as a teacher as well, as a teacher of yoga, as a teacher of spirituality, in the long run, it makes perfect sense as well. So that was when I had my major awakening, and then from there I just kind of matured into it. And I can't say that ripening process is finished by any means. It's not. I don't know if it will ever be. Like ripening into integrating this aspect of knowing into the world. Because of course there's times when I still fall unconscious, and times when I do things that I wish I hadn't done, and like with most people. But there's just more of a knowing, of a witnessing of what's happening, and a following of Dharma, and I guess kind of like, in some ways, this awakening, like, kind of started to dawn some. It had helped me to be able to, I don't know, fit together certain things so that I was easier able to speak about spirituality, and easier able to convey and these sorts of things, like just maturity, I guess, at the end of the day. So So yeah, in Tantra, especially in like the path that Rupert Spira is presenting, it's very much not about the awakening, because that's the easy part. That awakening is the easy part, the awakening to truth, the awakening to being, because that's what you already are. You just have to remove some veils of the mind and some distractions and these sorts of things. That's the easy part. The hard part is integrating it, the thing that actually is the work of it, you know. The awakening is easy because you already are that. And okay, the preliminary practices, it allowed me to move into that, but it's the integration. So what is the integration? The integration is in learning how to accept and not reject. The integration is learning how to have compassion for yourself and to be equanimous in hard times, and all the rest of these things. You know, to learn how to follow, the heart, to learn how to follow and step into wisdom and discernment and understanding, to learn how to be there all the time, regardless of the outer circumstances.
So I'm a little new here. What is Tantra? I feel like there's been lots of different definitions, and I think it's often something that's hard to define. But coming from somebody who practices it, what is it?
Tantra is a very misused term. Tantra has had different definitions over the ages, and really the thing which is called Tantra is something which the Western mind has created, because in India, the practices that they do, which involve tantric, which we would say are tantric practices, in the past they weren't really called tantric practices. They weren't really, but it's the Western way of mind to box things in. Tantra in the past has been called scripture. So certain scriptures were called tantras, which explain techniques for realization, for understanding truth, ultimate truth. Tantra has also been, and in this context as well, it's been termed as like a way which we can interact with the world through the tools of mantra, through the tools of mantra, of yagna, fire ceremony, and of yantra, amongst others as well. It's seen as well as a philosophical point of view of a way to see the universe, especially coming through. At least I talk about Hindu Tantra because that's what I know. I know a touch of Tibetan Tantra, and I don't know anything about the Tantra of Jainism or of Jainism. There's other ones too, but the philosophical understanding of Tantra is seeing that consciousness resides in every being everywhere, and this is quite common in Indian spirituality, that the sacred is within. It's not outside, it's actually residing within. However, Tantra is stating that material form or thought is just a condensed version of consciousness. So actually the body, or say this chair, is also consciousness, but it's a condensed version of that. It's as consciousness becomes more condensed, it creates the different life forms and the different aspects of the universe, such as thought. So thought is considered to be a condensed form, or emotions are a condensed form, or the body, or energy, and all the rest. So there's many definitions for Tantra. So we can decide ourselves what we think Tantra is, and it's the wrong meaning of it is sexuality. And the reason, it's kind of like how yoga in the West is considered like gymnastics, or it's like go to the gym or go to yoga. It's just exercise, because the West, especially America, but because it landed there, but maybe it could have been anywhere else, but it's like, what does the West care about? The West cares about, the West is a culture of the body. It's a cult of the body. It's fixated on how the body looks, how the body should smell, how the body, all the rest. And so the term yoga is mistermed, or means just some kind of gymnastics because of our fixation. And so Tantra, in most religions of the world, sex is like taboo. You don't do it. No one talks about it. Even though in most of the traditions as well, marriage is a sacrament. But sexuality, no one does that. We can't talk about it. We can't think about it. It's a sin. It's the primal sin, or the original sin, or all of this stuff. Where Tantra actually sees it as a way to touch upon the sacred. It sees it as a way to access love, as a way to access consciousness, and a way to realize the self ultimately. So, and it only became this maybe about 200 years ago, no, maybe 100 years ago, by a guy named, I think it was Pierre Bernard. He didn't even go to India. He just met an Indian guy in San Francisco who told him about Tantra and sexual Tantra, and then he created this neo-tantric field, which is all about sexuality, in the way that he thought it would work. So there's even they even call it, in some places, like it's the tradition of sexual Tantra, because it's been going for 100 years, but it's been misconstrued as to what it actually is in India and how it operates in India. The sexuality related with Tantra in India, when they would do ritual, or when they would do, I guess ritual, certain sexual rituals. And in India, they don't like to talk about it because sexuality is kind of taboo to talk about. India, the tantric tradition in India was suppressed by Islam when it arrived in India because of its own reasons, and then when the English arrived with the Victorian things, then it was suppressed even more, and even tantrics were hunted down and killed by the English because they were doing these abominations which weren't understood. And so a lot of the tantric tradition then was either put into hiding, or whatever the tantrics did, it became taboo and all the rest. And yeah, in these tantric sexual rituals, there was never lust. If there was any ounce of lust, like, it wasn't open to everybody. It would only be open to people who had conquered lust. And in these rituals, if there was an ounce, a touch of lust or anything like this present, you'd have to leave. The ritual would have to end and everyone would have to go home. So it was like, it was usually through a place of like an altered state of consciousness that this would happen, and it would be the uniting of Shiva and Shakti, or the uniting of two beings as archetypes of the universe, and how the universe is a coming together of these archetypes. And I don't even know, I can't even say that I fully know about this. Even though I do know a teacher who teaches this in a traditional manner, I haven't been initiated into this, and I don't understand it, so I can't really even speak about it. But there is a really beautiful book written about a tantric practitioner in Varanasi in the early 1900s. And he describes certain things regarding sexual tantra and how they were happening. But in no way was it like a I don't know, like a lustful thing or something like this. And the book's called, I referred this to a couple of people the other day, this book, The World of Tantra by Bhattacharya, The World of Tantra. And it's a beautiful rendition. It's a story that a guy wrote of his experiences as a tantric in Varanasi. And it's beautifully written, and he's an excellent writer, and he really captures the spirit of these states of transcendence that he would be placed into by his teacher. And so yeah, that's the basic meaning of Tantra. As we practice it here, we practice it through certain tools. And we talk about the non-dual aspect of Tantra, and then practice it practically through mantra, through fire ceremony, and through yagna. And so Tantra, the thing which unites all the different lineages and forms of Tantra, at least in Hinduism, because the practices are many, many. Tantra used to be called mantra marga, mantra marg. Marg means path, and mantra means like sacred syllables. So that was the one thing that they all had in common. They all had in common mantra. That was like the prime, the main, like the heart of it. And the reason why mantra is the heart of the tradition is because it's through mantra that that seed of enlightenment is placed. It's not through, although it could be as well, it's not through Shaktipat, like a transferring of energy just randomly or something, but it's through mantra. And it's like this because the gurus just didn't want to pass this out, because it's kind of, Jesus says, don't give pearls to the swine in one of his quotes. Don't give pearls to the swine, which means, like, if the swine are just going to eat these pearls, or if we give this Shaktipat, or we give this energy to somebody who isn't planning on doing anything with it, then what's the point? Because we kind of are depleting our own energy in a sense if nothing is to be done with that. So then this seed is then grown into a seedling, into a plant, or into a tree, and it's being watered every day through our practice of mantra. So so it also takes work, and the tantrics realize the importance of doing some work for it. So it's not just gifted upon us, because then we're not prepared for it. We don't have our energy system cleaned out. We might have a lot of psychoses as well happening, or things which are left uncovered. So the path of Tantra unfolds because mantra, especially the mantras that we do here anyway, the mantras help to, he can't expect the mantra meditations that we do to bring a feeling of peacefulness or some Zen thing. It brings energy, and the energy kind of stirs the pot and uncovers the darkness of the soul, and stirs us up so that we have to deal with all these things, so that when that seedling or that seed turns into the tree which bears fruit, and the fruit can then be given to others, then we have a certain maturity as well. So Guruji once said to me, he said, give mantras to everybody, but think 100 times before passing one out. So give mantras openly and freely to everyone, but think 100 times before sharing. And to kind of digest some of this, and to sit in silence and see that this mantra, whatever mantra you have, that's been gifted, is not just a saying, or not just something that we do on Fridays, but it's actually the seed which can unravel the mystery of our being, the mystery of the universe. And that it's the seed of the divine. And it's a seed that can take us towards truth. Take us to truth. If we're prepared to rise to the occasion, to put in the hard work and dedication and love into our practice, and place the divine, the sacred, the ultimate, the Anuttara, to place this in the center of our altar. And whatever else can come and go. All else is of a changing nature. And so I'd like us to finish with the Shivoham mantra. The Shivoham mantra basically states, I am Shiva, you are Shiva, we are all Shiva. Shiva is consciousness. Inhale to exhale. And inhale. Om Soham Sangam Shivoham Shivoham Shivatman Shivoham Shivoham. Hari Om.